Oh, hey, what's up? I know I've been all over the place. I was in Germany, and then I was, doing stuff over at the house in Central Oregon, and it's been a while since I've been in the small shop, and we started to get it set up, and then we just took a break. But I'm back in the small shop today, and we're starting to figure out what tools we want to put into this space. Now, one question I get all the time is, I have a small shop, what are the best tools for that space? Because we all know some tools are bigger than other tools, so we can't fit them all in the space that we want to put them in. A big one being the planer. Now, a planer's a problem because most planers, well, the big ones like the 20-inch, 15-inch, they're 220 and they're heavy and they're not easy to move around. And in a small space like this, you want something that's mobile, that you can pull out and use it when you need it, but you can put it away when you're not using it. So I did a deep dive into the best small planers on the market. Now, I want to say I am not sponsored in any way for this video. The planer that I'm going to show you in this video, I got on Amazon. I used my own money. I purchased it. The company that makes this planer doesn't even know I'm doing this video. And I'm going to be completely honest as to what I think about this planer because it got really good reviews online. So I'm going to put it together, I'm going to run it through some tests, and then I'm going to go against the factory warranty and I'm going to modify said planer to make it even better. I think, but we'll find that out later in the video. So follow along and let's see if we can find a good planer for a small shop. You and me, together. What do you say? This was my old planer. It's a Grizzly, it's not the best brand on the market. I'm actually going to be upgrading to a Powermatic when I redo the whole new shop. But there's some nice things about this planer. It's 20 inches wide, so you can fit some wide material through there. But the most important thing to me was the fact that it's a helical head. Now, if you don't know the difference between a helical head planer and a straight knife planer, well, I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. I'm going to open this thing up and I'm going to talk about the difference. So this is inside my helical head planer. Ooh, it's a little dusty. So I've already turned this off. Don't worry, it's not going to turn on me. But as you can see, it's this spiral cutter head, and it's got a ton of these little tiny square blades. Now, a huge benefit to a helical head planer is that instead of being a traditional knife planer, which doesn't have these square blades, it's got these long, straight knives, usually 2 or 3 knives on the head that spin around and cut. Well, the problem with the straight knives is that if you get a nick in one of those knives, it's going to affect your entire pass from that point on until you replace the blade. With a helical head planer, because it's got a ton of little tiny blades, if you get a nick in one of them, well, there's a bunch more that are gonna pick up the slack. With a helical head, they're 4-sided. So if you get a nick in one, you can unscrew it and rotate it, tighten it back down, and you're good to go. Which means that for every single blade in a helical head, you have 4 uses out of each one of those blades. Which means that you're not gonna have to buy replacement blades for a very long time. The only problem is that a helical head planer is typically associated with a large industrial size planer. Now, not exclusively, there are small lunchbox style helical head planers on the market. But as far as I could tell, all of them get pretty shoddy reviews. People aren't happy with them. They say they get bogged down easy, they shut off easily, and they just don't work that well. So what do? Because all the good rated smaller planers are not helical head, they're traditional knife planer blades. And I don't want that because of all the aforementioned reasons. Another huge benefit to the helical head is supposedly it makes the machine a lot quieter because it's giving you a smoother cut. So I searched and I searched and I think I might have found a solution. But that's what this video is all about. Whether or not this is a good solution or whether it's just all hogwash. So after doing a lot of searching online and reading a lot of customer reviews, the planer that I landed on, because according to the customers that bought it was the best, is this guy, the DeWalt 735X. I know it's pronounced DeWalt, I just wanted to make all you DeWalt freaks out there mad. Now, this planer on Amazon has been reviewed almost 10,000 6,000 times with an average review of 4.7 stars, which if you know anything about the review system, that's pretty darn good. So I purchased it. But it does have some drawbacks in my opinion. Those straight knives, don't like that. Also, the #1 critique on this particular planer was it's incredibly loud, which you might be able to tell this shop's a little more echoey than my other shop, and in small shops, loud tools, well, they kind of hurt your ears. So I'm gonna put this thing together, and I'm going to test its sound output to see how loud it really is. And then I'm gonna make a slight modification. Also, in my research, I found that you can actually convert this planer from a straight knife planer to a helical head planer using this Helical system. Now, this is an aftermarket product. It is not made by DeWalt. And you might be able to see on the outside of this package that this currently has a 3-year warranty. Well, the second I put this puppy in here, I'm gonna void the warranty. So it's kind of a big risk, but without risk, there is no reward. So I'm gonna put this together. I'm gonna run it through the test as is, see how loud it is, see how well it cuts, and then after doing all those tests, I'm gonna swap out the normal blades for this helical head, and we're gonna run those same tests again. I'm gonna see, is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is this really a good planer for this size shop? I don't know. Let's find out.
So here's a fun fact about Jason. If there's one thing I hate more than anything else in this entire world, it is putting together things off a set of instructions. But I'm not one to complain, so let's try and make the best of this. Now, this is the stand for the planer. You don't really need a stand for your planer. You could just build a box out of plywood, but when I was shopping on Amazon, it said if you like this, well, you might also like this. And I was a little click happy, so I added it to the cart, and next thing I know, here I am stuck in my garage on a nice sunny day putting together a metal stand.
All right, stand is done. All I have to say is DeWalt needs to get their instruction game together because that required way too much reading. The perfect set of instructions, you shouldn't have to read at all. You should just be able to look at the pictures. I really hope this does not require nearly as much assembly.
You would think that I'd be really upset to be downgrading from my big industrial 20-inch helical head planer to this small yellow lunchbox planer. But I gotta tell you, I'm kind of excited to set up a smaller shop. It'll be a nice change of pace for a while, to do things on a smaller scale, to use something that takes longer with less power. Okay, this might actually suck.
Okay, I have this entire thing put together, so now we can actually start testing it. Now it still is stock out of the box with those straight knives in there. I've yet to switch it out for the helical head, and I don't want to do that yet because I want to test it as is. Now the #1 complaint in the reviews online was that this thing is incredibly loud. Now I tested my other planer that I've been using for years in the shop, using this little sound measurement device. Now this measures dBAs. If you don't know what a dBA is, well, neither did I until I looked it up a second ago. It's just a unit of measuring sound. That's all you really need to know. Now, I also looked up what's like a good level of sound, and this is what it says. It says that the World Health Organization, WHO, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, recommend keeping environmental noise levels below 70 dBA over 24 hours. So 70 dBA, if I turn this on, blah, 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 is like right about there where I'm talking. Now, my planer measured at like 79 dBA when it was just turned on with no dust collection running, and right at about 100 when I was pushing a board through. Now, if you keep reading, it says that Occupational Safety and Health, or OSHA, we love those guys, recommend keeping the workplace at or below 85 dBA over an 8-hour period. So that planer, when it's turned on, is below what's recommended for OSHA, which means I wouldn't even need hearing protection. It only bumps up over the 85 dBA when I start running a board through it. So that seems pretty good, but I don't have anything to compare it to. So I'm gonna turn this thing on and I'm gonna see what dBA this puts out just with the planer running. Let's check it out.
Now, I turned the volume down for you guys, but let me just tell you, this thing is pretty loud. And not only is it loud, it screeches like a banshee.
Interesting. So this planer is just as loud without even running a board through it as my other planer is when it's fully in use running wood and planing material. But we're not done yet because I also want to test this while I'm running a board through. Now, normally I would have this hooked up to dust collection, but the dust collector is going to also create noise. So if I hook up the dust collection, it's not really going to accurately tell me how high the dBAs are on this because it's going to be picking up the dust collector too. So even though it's going to make a huge mess in my shop, for the sake of science, I'm going to run this board through with no dust collection and monitor the dBAs. Sounds so official. Let's do it. I'm also going to put in my isotunes because this thing's already really flipping loud and I don't want to hurt my ears.
It's really funny how pitch can actually make you think something's not as loud as it really is, because even though the reader is saying this is louder, the pitch is lower, so it's not as offensive when you're listening to that board go through the planer. But it's doing just as much, if not more, damage to your ears.
Well, this thing sure does make a mess. Now the highest I read the dBAs on that was 107. It might have bumped up to 108 for just a second. So that puts it about 8 or 9 dBA above my helical head when it is fully operational, which doesn't seem like a lot. Is that a lot? I don't know. I'm gonna have to look that up. But my real question is it going to change when I switch it out to the helical head to make it quieter? I don't know. There's only one way to find out, and that is to figure out how to get the regular knife blade head out of here and the helical head over here. In there. So that's what I'm gonna do now.
Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a busy guy, which means I don't always have time to cook a meal. That's why I love these meals from Factor, because when it comes to meals, everyone wants the same thing: options. Factor offers 35 wholesome meals every week, including Gourmet Plus, Keto, Calorie Smart, Vegan, plus Veggie, so you'll always find something you love that suits your lifestyle. If you're like me, you've got a lot going on this fall outside the kitchen, so keep your plans and turn to Factor. They deliver fresh, nutritious, chef-prepared meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Whether you're managing calories, maximizing your protein intake, or trying to eat more balanced, Factor has a dietitian-approved meal that will help you meet your wellness goals. Oh, did I mention that they're really flippin' delicious too? I was always skeptical of these ready-to-eat meals, but I gotta say, Factor's chefs have it dialed in because every meal I've tried so far has been delicious. Now, you might have seen that I worked with HelloFresh in the past, which HelloFresh now owns Factor, so it's no wonder that Factor's meals taste just as good as the ones I was getting from HelloFresh. The only big difference is I don't have to cook these. Somebody else did that work for me. Even my wife loves them, and she's a pretty darn good cook. So here's what you're going to want to do. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Bourbon50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code Bourbon50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. Now, I'm not sure what I expected in switching out the old head for this new helical head, but I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it actually was. Now, Bird Tools, the maker of the Helics, do include this nice web address where you can go and they have step-by-step instructions. But even with the step-by-step instructions, it was a lot of work because you basically have to disassemble the entire planer. So let's get started. The first thing you have to do is remove this top cover, which isn't that big of a deal because you have to do that anytime you switch out the planer blades anyways. With the top cover removed, next you have to remove the dust extractor cover thing. That's pretty easy because it just has these red thumb screws that, well, unscrew. And that exposes the cutter head. Then you have to remove each and every one of the blades and blade guards. This takes a while because there's a million screws to this part. Then you have to remove the handle, which I spent so much precious time putting on when I was setting up the planer, and then you have to remove this side cover plate. That exposes the chain drive and the belt. With all of that exposed, you have to remove the chain tensioning arm that's held on with a spring and a screw, and then you have to remove the chain and the 2 sprockets. Then you have to unhook the belt, which takes a little bit of doing, and push that over to the side. Then it says in the instructions to insert a piece of wood so that the planer head can't spin. I didn't have a piece of wood, so I just shoved a pair of pliers in there. Then I used a socket wrench to remove this nut holding on the planer head. I pulled off that little wheel, took out that little key, and I removed this little washer. Then last but not least, I had to unhook this little lock ring, get that out of the way, and I was ready to move to the other side, where I had to take off another cover, remove another tensioning arm, remove another chain and 2 sprockets, and remove some more washers and get rid of this whole gearbox. Now the gearbox is still attached, so you just kind of push that to the side. Then using a piece of hardwood and a mallet, you can start beating on that cutter head to try and pop it out the other side of the planer. This felt wrong in so many ways, but it actually worked pretty good, and I was able to slide the cutter head out of the machine. And it looked something like this. Now on the end of the stock cutter head, there is this helical gear that goes into the gearbox and drives the head. I had to remove that because we're actually going to use that gear and put it on our new helical head. It just screws in, so you just screw it in. It's pretty, that one's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now the tricky part is now you have to thread the new helical head in this tiny little hole all the way through the planer and make it meet up with the other side. I know that doesn't sound very tricky, but the last thing you want to do is scrape these brand new helical head blades all along the housing as you thread it through there, because, well, that's going to ding up your blades and make them dull. But I got it done, tapped it back in place with a piece of hardwood from the other side, and then you basically just have to put the whole thing back together. You reinstall your gearbox. Once that's in place, you put back on your chain and your sprockets with the little lock rings that come with that. You reset your tensioning arm and you replace the cover and all the appropriate little screws. Once that's installed, you move back over to the other side. You have to reinsert this locking ring. I had to use a pair of needle nose pliers to pinch it in place, slap on all those covers, reinstall your dust cover with those little thumb screws, tighten on your top, and then just for kicks, I decided to change the name of the machine from DeWalt to Helical, because it's no longer a DeWalt. I don't really know what it is.
All right. Now, I will say that was a lot more involved than I expected it to be, but this Bird Tool Company with the Helical, their instructions were amazing. I also will tell you, just in case you're wondering, no, I'm not sponsored by this company either. Just put that on there for fun. This is all out of my own curiosity. So now that we have that in there, I'm really curious to see if it's any quieter than with the straight knife blades. So first, I'm just gonna do a test with just turning it on, not running wood through, okay? That's just sitting in there. The old one was right around 100, I think. This one. So it is a little quieter. It's like 5 dBA quieter. So that's actually kind of surprising because I didn't think just the thing spinning around would make it that much louder. But the real question is it quieter when you're running wood through there? So once again, I'm gonna turn this thing on without any dust collection and make my shop all messy. Put my hearing protection back in. Let's find out. Interesting. So it in fact does make it quieter. Does it make it a lot quieter? I don't know. The thing I've noticed is it changes the pitch. So before with the straight knife blades, it was this very annoying, not high pitched, just like eating away at your brain noise. This is still loud, but it's a lower pitch that's not quite as ear splitting and annoying. And it is quieter by about 10 dBA. So that's something to be said. The other thing is I looked pretty closely at the couple passes I did off camera with the straight knife, and it looked like this. Now this is gonna be really hard to see online on the video, but it's smooth, but you can see a little bit of chatter horizontal across the board, where with the helical head, this is like butter. I mean, it's basically just a couple passes on the sander away from being ready to finish. I know it's not going to stay like that forever. The blades are going to dull over time, but I'm pretty impressed with the fact that you can just switch this out for a helical head. And now we have a nice helical head planer that's small and compact that we can wheel away. It'll be perfect for the small shop. Now, I know you're wondering, what did this whole setup cost? Well, the planer itself was $618.99. So not cheap, but a lot cheaper than a big industrial planer. The stand was another $158, which I could do without. You could always build your own. So that brings you up to almost $800. And then the Helix conversion was around $400 for the Helix cutter head. So if you add the cutter head to the planer, you're at right around $1,000 for a nice helical head mobile planer. That's still a lot cheaper than if you wanted to buy an industrial planer, and it does have its advantages to a small shop. It's smaller, the wings fold up, I can wheel it against the wall, and the big one is it's 120, not 220, which means you can plug it into any outlet and it should work great. Another drawback that I heard to converting the DeWalt planer to the helical head is that it draws more power, and it does have a higher tendency to cut out in the middle of a pass, to trip the circuit or the breaker. So that's something to think about. I won't really know if that's going to be a problem until I use it quite a bit. But with any planer, it usually gets bogged down when you're running too much material at once, meaning you're taking too thick of passes. So as long as you're taking nice light passes, I would assume it would be okay. Anyways, that's all I got for you this week. This is a very interesting experiment. So far, so good. And I'll try and check in with you guys later once I use this for hours at a time, and I'll let you know what I think then. Until next time, make sure you check the links in the video description for all the products and everything I used in this video. There's also a link to our Patreon. There's a link to the Bourbon blade. Batch 2 is shipping out this week, so if you ordered one from Batch 2, they are on their way. And we just ordered Batch 3, so there's still time to get one if you haven't yet. Links in the description. I gotta clean up all this sawdust. There's a reason we use dust collection.